Welcome, everyone, to IMCC Charlotte. I am Alexis Stein, one of the Dharma leaders, and it's good to be back. I've been gone a while. I have titled tonight's talk, Finding Life in the Midst of Living. Every day, we are presented with opportunities to explore how we put the teachings of the Buddha to work. Tonight, we're going to look at how we can live with life's difficulties and experience more ease in our daily lives. My talk was triggered by a number of observations about the craziness of my life experiences this past year, not the least of which were the death of my former partner and the pandemic, and of a classic panel discussion called The Wondrous Path of Difficulties with Pema Chodron and Jack Kornfield, that was published in 2005. First, I want to tell you a story, a true story. I call it the passport story. In February of 2020, I applied for a new passport. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived telling me that the only way my order would be fulfilled would be for me to include my old passport with my request. That was confusing since I had already included the passport in my initial request with a check to expedite the order. 3 days later, I called them, explaining that I had indeed included my old passport with my letter. Of course, by then, we were in the early stages of the pandemic. They explored my concerns. They said they couldn't find my passport, and I was referred to a supervisor who suggested I call back in a week. I documented the call and called back a week later. At that point, there were very few people working in the office, and I was told to call back in 3 weeks. Now, mind you, that's when we were thinking that this pandemic would be over shortly, typical of the things that happened to us on the way to living life. I proceeded to call back in a few weeks, and I was told I would need to go to a post office where there was a passport office. That option was totally unappealing to me because of COVID and my age. Now, fast forward to April 2021, 14 months later, and I received a big package from the United States State Department. In it was my old passport returned, a divorce decree for a family in Santa Clara, California, that I had never heard of, no explanation, and a form letter telling me that because I did not respond in the required 90 days, my passport request was denied and my check would not be returned, but I could feel free to apply again. So the next day I called the passport office and I waited 55 minutes on the line to get a real person on the phone. He was very nice, but he couldn't explain the inconsistencies, but he acknowledged that in their records was documentation saying that I had called back 3 times in 90 days in response to my request. He then put me on hold for another supervisor, and within moments, my call was abruptly dropped. There I was, left listening to a dial tone. Okay. The next day I called back. I waited a long time to speak to someone again, and then I immediately gave them my phone number to call me back if we got disconnected. I was informed they're not allowed to call out on their lines. Now, at this point, my smarts of giving them my phone number up front had not worked, and I was stymied, frustrated, and annoyed, and was about to lose my cool and patience, but I knew that wouldn't do any good, and I still needed their help. So it wouldn't be Buddhist to be rude. It also wouldn't have been appropriate, and I wouldn't have gotten my needs met. Well, the story did get resolved after lots of long waits and 3 calls and my sending the divorce decree back that was mistakenly sent to me in the first place. So many frustrating hours later, the issue, as I said, was finally resolved and many lessons were learned. Well, you might say that that is not a good example of the difficulties one experiences daily, but I will have to beg to differ with you. And I bet there are at least a half a dozen people in our Sangha that have experienced bizarre miscommunications, mistakes by institutions, and long waits to get a live person, dropped calls, and then needing to start all over. 3 times this last week, I waited over 60 minutes each for a real person to respond when trying to open a new account in relationship to my being an executor of an estate. This time, however, I just realized this is the way it is. And I worked on other things the entire time I was waiting, and it surprised me. I got a lot done, and I was not fazed. This is what is meant by revealing and learning about our habitual patterns that are provoked by the daily difficulties we face regularly. Mindful attentiveness and awareness to our habit energy is an opportunity to transform our reactions and behaviors. Realizing this is the way it is and learning to roll with it can change our lives for the better. When we add to the frustration and annoyances we face by overreacting or acting on our feeling level, we heap an additional amount of suffering on ourselves that is unnecessarily necessary and totally irrelevant to the situation. Difficulties in life are inevitable, and can be an excellent lesson in self-discovery and transformation, as long as we tap into and pay attention to our reactions. By acknowledging how we respond to events, we can use them as a learning tool. And by using Buddhist principles as the teacher, we can change our life and live with more ease. Pema Chodron says that problems that are both minor and major are always happening in our life. And yet, for some reason, we keep thinking something has gone wrong. Buddhism teaches us to work with whatever comes up as our path of awakening. Instead, we often treat our life experiences as some kind of deviation from what is supposed to be happening. The more difficulties you have, in fact, the greater opportunity there is to let them work as your teacher. Difficult things provoke us and irritate us and bring our habitual patterns to the surface, and that can become a moment of truth for us. We have the choice to launch into those old worn patterns of, isn't it terrible, that we often use to cope, or to stay with the sting and discomfort of this situation and let it transform us and awaken us to new, healthier, more wholesome responses. Difficulties and frustrations can help us find a way to freedom that can serve us well in our relationships with life and the world. Jack Kornfield says, it's the kind of freedom that can serve us better than almost anything else. But practicing meditation can get us to mistakenly think that the spiritual path is about transcending the difficulties of our life and eliminating them, Pema says. But that doesn't help us very much because it sets us up for being constantly disappointed with all the things that can and do go wrong daily. Jack says we have these great ideas about how life is supposed to be and how we're supposed to be. But he continues, when we are standing in a long line that isn't moving, we find ourselves saying, this store should anticipate busy times. How come they can't get it together? We don't have to pretend that our irritability is not there or compare it unfavorably with our ideal version of how things should be. We can simply take a breath and say, this is how it is right now. And this is anger, or this is fear, this is annoying, or whatever emotion is identified. There's another kind of gesture that you can also practice, which Jack thinks of as a kind of inward bow. You can say, here's anger, here's irritation, here is being really, put your own word in, off. And not only that, I had a hard day and this is making everything worse. We can bow to that and acknowledge what we are feeling and not heap shame onto the experience because the world isn't cooperating with us and we are not who we want to be. Jack, at the time of this talk, had a new favorite quote that he shared with everyone. If you can sit quietly after difficult news, if in financial downturns you remain perfectly calm, if you can see the new house that the neighbors just bought without a twinge of jealousy, if you can happily eat whatever is put on your plate and fall asleep after a day of running around without a drink or a pill, if you can always find contentment just where you are, you're probably a dog. It's a sense of humor about the disruptions, disappointments, and shortcomings of our lives that help things become more workable and less stressful. It's the part that we put on top of our ordinary suffering that creates the real problem. Then we not only have our suffering or reaction to the event, but we make matters worse by heaping a running dialogue in our head on top of it, all with thoughts like, this shouldn't be happening. I can't believe it. How could this be? This is terrible. How will I get around this? On and on and on. Sometimes we even act out and end up even dumping on others. In addition, we have all these ideals and images that we expect ourselves to live up to, and that puts a layer of spiritual suffering on top of the basic suffering. And all of the above is what we mean by the second arrow. And we're probably all guilty of that, unless we're dogs. Without exploring our habit energy, we can wallow in our misery and question, why me? But when we understand the first noble truth of the Buddha's teaching and really understand what is meant by suffering, then we begin to stop resisting what we are experiencing. Don't pretend that your discomfort is no big deal, or chastise yourself for feeling how you feel. Make the choice to recognize and honor your experience. When we get curious about our energy, we can better explore our automatic responses and see how we make bad things worse instead of how we can make things, if not better, more tolerable. It's a matter of being aware of our reactions and seeing the energy as it arises in us. Instead of immediately reacting to what is happening right here and right now, we step back from those automatic behaviors. Oh, this is irritation. This is being disappointed. This is frustration. And this is how it is right now. See the short fuse, and this is what about to lose it looks like and feels like, and ask, will this reaction make everything worse? Now, the key here is to ask yourself, do I want to reinforce and strengthen this habit by responding the way I always do? Or is there a way I can let it roll off my back like a dog might do? finding humor to allow ourselves to relax into what is happening, and saying to yourself, this too puts space between the event and the negative reaction, and allows us to choose a different way of being in the moment. When we find a way to shake up the habit energy and weaken it, the habit begins to lose strength, and over time, not always, but over time, we can decrease our poor me, helpless second arrow response or knee-jerk response, and learn to lighten our load called life. It's really strange to sit here and tell a story and laugh at my own jokes and hear silence. It makes me wonder if it went over, but I loved the story about the dog. So I'm going to open it up to questions. And you are welcome to either type your response or ask a question or take yourself off mute. Thank you for the comments. I appreciate that. Dirk asks, why is it so difficult? It's difficult because we think we're in charge. We think we're in control. And if we plan things well and we have our act together, nothing's supposed to go wrong. Dawn, thank you for your enjoyment of the dog story. I appreciate that too. I loved Pima's reaction to the fact that things are supposed to go wrong. That's what life is. And it certainly made sense to me, but I never thought of it that way. Jeff says, I've heard that man makes plans and the gods laugh. Thanks for your comments, Marty. Even after years, I think I'm still surprised that things constantly go wrong. I'm still trying to figure out why the State Department sent me a 20-page divorce decree. And Dave and Cindy, I'm glad you enjoyed my jokes. There was only the one about the dog, but it made sense to me. And it also reminds me of Tara Brock's story about the duck that rides the waves, no matter whether it's raining or stormy or cold or the sun is burning up, the duck just rides the waves. I'm going to read our announcements. And if anyone else wants to write something, Denise has also put them on the chat so that you can see them as I read them. And know that all of our announcements are on our website. So anything you miss, please feel free to check out the website, www.imccharlotte.org. We want to thank you for your generosity, those of you who donate, and you can donate on the website again by going to the website address /donate. Some of you already know that Tuesday noon sits have resumed, and you can find the Zoom link on the website. Book discussion group started last week, and the book by Analia, Mindfully Facing Disease and Death, that both Joy Lybeth and Larry DeWalt are sharing with us, was very, very interesting. The book is full of wonderful insights that many times we don't pay attention to, how it can help us when we're sick or hurting emotionally or physically. Next week, David Chernikoff will be our guest leader, and that's May 19th. And he will be starting at 7. So please be aware that it's going to start early on the 19th. And on May 22nd, he's going to lead a day-long retreat. So please register on the website. In June, Mary Aubrey will also be a guest leader, and that's on the 16th of June. Some of you may have already started signing up for the IMCC Summer Retreat, August 19th through 22nd. We hope to see you there. Remember that the last Wednesday of each month, there will be a Zoom live instruction session. And the link, of course, is going to be on the website. We continue doing the first Wednesday of each month as a practice discussion group at 6:45. If you've got questions or things you want to share or get clarified, this is the time. It's usually a small group with a Dharma leader and an opportunity to get your questions answered. I want to thank all of our volunteers. We don't see them working. They are behind the scenes, especially now, but they're there. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to be here tonight. Are there any other questions or concerns that anybody wants to share before I go to Meta? I thank you all for your messages and comments. They're really appreciated.
Alexis, I'm sorry.
Alexa's a machine.
And that has trained me well, obviously. As sad as that is to say. Oh, I
How
wanted
are
to,
you?
I'm so good. This talk was wonderful. Thank you so much for the talk.
Well,
It
good.
was a wonderful reminder of something that that I definitely feel like my practice has given me, is the ability to be like, oh, yep, be a little more curious, a little kinder to myself about the fact that you know, life is a hot mess a lot of the time. So
Yeah.
I yeah.
And
So
and if you really look at it, something goes wrong every day. Some of them are minor and we don't even notice them and we don't think about it. If you're used to traffic, you know to either listen to a good book on tape or listen to some good music, and you just ride with it.
right.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you, Alexis. It was really good. And I did want to make just a brief announcement on behalf of the programs committee. There will be a pop-up meditation at Boyce Park on Sunday, the 16th, weather permitting, at 2:00. So if you want to come out for a few minutes of fellowship and a 30-minute sit together where we can smile, actually face to face, we'd love to see you.
Thank you. And I noticed that on the chat, I was correct about the 7:00 start time for David Chernikoff. And it's a wonderful opportunity not to have to leave your house if it's rainy and ugly like today. Although I like the rain, I don't think of it as ugly. But just turn on your Zoom and he comes right into your home. We hope you will join us, all of you, next Wednesday night at 7. Thank you. Well, I'd like to invite us to do metta. Metta is going to be a little bit different tonight. And this metta comes from Ayakima and her book, Know Where You're Going. So make yourself comfortable and just hear the words that I'm sharing and take them in. Let's first just concentrate on the breath for just a moment. Let compassion arise in your heart for yourself and for all the pain and grief that has already happened in this life, is there now, and may yet come. Feel compassion for the lack of realization and compassion for the difficulties of the practice. Let this feeling embrace you and hold you safe and secure. And now extend your compassion to everyone who is meditating with you tonight. Remember that everyone has pain and grief. Remembering that everyone would like care and concern. Embrace everyone with your compassion. Think of all those people whose lives are far more difficult than ours. They may be in hospitals, in prisons, in refugee camps, in war-torn countries. They may be hungry, crippled, blind, without shelter or friends. Let this heart of compassion reach out to all of them. Embrace them with it. Empathize with them. Realize their pain. Wish to help. Now, move your attention back to yourself and let this feeling of compassion fill you from head to toe and surround you, giving you a sense of being helped and cared for, accepted and at ease. May all beings have compassion for each other. May you all remember that we're all in this together, even when we disagree, even when we're banging our head against the wall, even when people are dropping your call. We're all, as Bo Lozoff would say, we're all doing time.